one. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you for having me. Is it a show? Or Zoom's actually a show? I don't know if they are, but I'm happy to be here anyway.
It's a distribution channel for a show, I guess. But it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I've been following your work.
I'm just teasing, relax. I'm just teasing.
Oh, it's all good, mate. It's all good. I'm expecting a lot of teasing today, mate. We kicked off on a teasing note, so I'm expecting a lot more. But look, mate, I've been a fan of your work since around 2000 when pizza took off. I think I was about 16 years old at that point.
You're still wearing the same tracksuit. I'm glad to see
still wearing the same tracksuit. I know, mate.
Oh, me too.
Look, I mean, this has been through the wash at least 2,000 times. It's still bright red. So I don't know.
I don't know. There's something in the nylon of those tracksuits of that era, mate. They last forever. I've got Kappa tracksuits. So I've taken them into a volcano and come out, and they're still fine. So.
Oh, man, I've got parachute tracksuits from the early 90s that are still rocking, mate. Still, yeah, fluorescent greens and all that sort of good stuff. But my audience predominantly, we're talking about entrepreneurs. We're talking about people who are trying to, kick big goals in life, entrepreneurs, entertainers, musicians, artists, you name it. And, who better to talk about climbing that mountain than yourself? I mean, you've done that, obviously, in Australia in the comedic space, TV, film, all that sort of good stuff. Now, most of my audience will obviously know you as Paulie Falzoni, but of course you are Paul Fenech, and I'm keen to know a little bit more about your backstory today. I know you grew up in Sydney. Was that whereabouts in Sydney did you grow up, mate?
In the city, Sydney, like Leichhardt, Marrickville, Stanmore, kind of the rough areas back then,
Yeah.
I guess they were like, whatever the rough areas. Where are you? Are you in Melbourne or Sydney?
Yeah, I'm in Melbourne.
Okay, so I guess it would be like the equivalent to, I don't know, St Albans or Broadmeadows.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Sunshine, mate, so I know that story well. Sunshine.
I was gonna mention Sunshine, and there you go. You
disappointed me by saying St Albans, mate. They're our arch rivals. So next time, Sunshine. But so you grew up in the inner west, working class area, lots of ethnics in that area and everything else. And when did you start to get this inkling that you wanted to start creating films? Because I understand it was quite early.
Yeah, I don't know. I started making, when I was a boy, maybe 10, 11 type of thing. I used to go to the movies by myself. I didn't have a lot of friends at that stage. I was just little and changed a lot of schools. And the movies was kind of like my escape, like a bit of a cliche, but it actually was for me. So I fell in love with the whole thing. I loved the experience, and I guess I loved the experience so much. I wanted to. First I thought, maybe I would want to be an actor, because who doesn't want to be an actor? Because you see the movies, you watch James Bond, he gets all the chicks, he drives fancy cars, wins all the fights. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? As a job or as an ambition? It's sold to you as this amazing experience. So anyway, then I guess I kind of realised that in Australia at the time I probably was going to have no chance of becoming an actor because I was ethnic. And there was a lot of Craig McLaughlin's on TV. Not many Paulie Fenechs, and I decided to start making short movies. I sort of got more interested in maybe directing. I thought there might be more of a chance to have a career in that, I suppose. So I was making all these short movies all through high school, videos. I got
the big VHS cameras?
Oh, my very first thing that I made was a Betamax video. It was my parents' Betamax in the lounge room, and we lived in a little house, and I ran the cable from that player recorder to the side passage, and I had a camera, and I had to sort of record each shot bit by bit. So I'd sort of say, blah, 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 press pause, do the next shot, blah, 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 press pause. And that's how I made my first little movie. So it was even before the VHS on the shoulder.
You remember what your first movie was about?
Yeah, I think I was Spider-Man and my friend was Dracula, but I think he was a Lebanese Dracula, so we called him Lebula. That was the
Lebula.
name. Love it. Ironically,
Yeah,
no offense to any Lebanese people out there or any Lebanese vampires watching.
No, of course not. And this is probably a bit of a departure from your typical, ethnic kid growing up in the western suburbs. I mean, most of us either become tradies or go off to become accountants or something like that. Was it something that your family really supported you with growing up?
I don't know, man. I just loved entertainment. I loved I think I loved a lot. There's a few different things I love. I love movies. I love making people laugh. And I don't know. It's little bits of luck here and there. And I don't know. I just fell into it. I started doing like a little video course. My dad took me to some what do you call it? Like a town hall where they were doing courses to show people kids how to make videos or something. I should thank him for that, because that's sort of what really, I guess, made me a little bit more serious about it, because it became like a hobby for me. I'd go every so often, and then I'd learn little things, you know, we'd make little movies.
I know you are.
I don't know. I'm not, in case you haven't noticed, I'm not a very kind of typical person. I'm a little bit eccentric. My brain works a little differently, I think, to most people. I never wanted to go the straight way, the way that everyone else went. Yeah. It's funny you said about the path for ethnics, because I went to this one school, Leichhardt High, which was fully Italian, you know. Yeah. And by year 10, all the boys left to go and be mechanics, and all the girls left to go and be hairdressers. So it was true back then. There were certain jobs that, you know, certain ethnic groups just gravitated to. I don't know, just because they thought they had to. I don't know. Or maybe they couldn't think of anything better. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe they just didn't know that there were other pathways available to them, and they just followed who came before them, I guess. But I guess it's important to have people around you who kind of break that mold and inspires you to think bigger. At least these days, the kids have, you know, Instagram and Twitter where they can get inspiration from other people. But I know you mentioned that your dad was one of your biggest supporters, and you know, obviously he passed away a few years ago. But how important was it to have that support from your folks?
Oh, look, in all honesty, back then I was a bit of a wild child. I don't know. I just did my own thing. I think they were just trying to, I think he was smart enough to try and push me towards things that would keep me out of trouble. Because I was a troublemaker. I'm not going to deny it.
You were in a ethnic others gang or something like that?
Oh, I wouldn't say, no, I was an army of one, mate. You know, a different story, you know, like I kind of got bullied a lot, and I ended up in a lot of fights, and through it all, I ended up being kind of, you know, like I said, my own tough guy. I didn't need other people. I didn't believe in kind of, you know, being in a group or something, you know. So, and I was boxing when I was a kid at school too. So I didn't really like team sports. Don't ask me why. I just sort of got into boxing, gymnastics, anything that was kind of a solo sport, you know. So I don't know. I don't know what happened. I'm just stubborn, I suppose, you know, like just like a lot of guys of my era, I think we're just very kind of single-minded and very individual, you know.
You reckon spending so much time on your own kind of helped you become a better writer, because it forces you to kind of just observe things around you a lot more and process?
100%. I think the reason I developed a keen imagination is when I remember we didn't have many toys, you know, like the toys the kids have now. It's crazy, you know, like you get a toy for anything, you know, but we had very limited toys back then. And I used to have this bookcase and little, you know, like novel, I don't know what you call them, softback books in there, right? And I used to have little figures like Star Wars or whatever the hell it was, and I would pretend it was the Death Star, and I would slide the books out like they were sort of the doors, and like in and out, and I would have these little battles with these little figures that would go through the different levels of the bookcase. You know, in my mind, there was little stories going on, and I really think that, you know, sort of being on my own, like you said, and just I don't know, playing as a child really gave me an active imagination. It's given me a great life, you know. Without my imagination, I'd be nothing, really.
Yeah, and I mean, as you've alluded to a few times, you know, you're a bit of a, you know, loner, for lack of a better word, growing up. You know, got into fights a lot, but you know, you're someone who has probably done it your own way in terms of the entertainment pathway in Australia. You've gone against the grain. To what extent do you think that tough upbringing has forced you to just do things your own way and, you know, kind of not give a shit about the tried and true path that everyone else follows?
Well, I don't think I was kind of how I planned that or anything. I think a lot of my success was really came down to just the fact that I would just keep working hard when nobody else would. Never took no for an answer. If they said no to one idea, I had 5 others to back me up, you know. I think it was just sort of a bit of being stubborn, I think, to be honest. I didn't like kind of not winning, or not winning. Winning's not the right answer, but, you know, if I wanted something, I really went for it, you know. I think, but I did get 2 sets of skills. I mean, boxing gave me a really great self-discipline, you know, like after you get hit in the head a few times in the ring and you can kind of do it over and over and over, you can just deal with it just about anything, you know, like it's, and I was in the army briefly and,
for about a year or so.
Yeah, and that gave me some more, like the great thing. I mean, look, I wouldn't recommend it for everybody because you might get shot these days. Back then, there was no wars. It was great, you know. Just went around the base picking up papers and doing guard duty. That was about it, you know. But you know, the training did sort of, let's say, add to my personal strength, like they make you do things you never, especially as an ethnic kid, ethnic kids never, the parents are scared of everything, like don't go in the water, it's dangerous, don't go in the bush, there's a snake, don't. Well, my dad was scared of everything, but then you go to the army and you just have to, you're throwing bombs, you're shooting rifles, you're running around in the dark and, all this crazy stuff. And it really, you march for 30 Ks. I never thought I'd march for 30 Ks of my life, but I did it, Yeah. And all of that sort of just ultimately, when I got to TV, TV was easier, after all of my upbringing and all of that. Like, I was so happy to be in such an easy, fun job. I just found it like a real pleasure, because I had real jobs too, like I was a hairdresser's assistant, I was a landscaper, I was a painter, the list goes on. I had a lot of real jobs kind of all the way through. So I really appreciated what a bludge TV really is. It's easy. It is easier than a real job. You just play. It's like you're creating a play acting thing. It's like I'm still a child. I'm still playing with those little figures on the bookcase, but the figures are now actors and the bookcase is a set.
That's it. No, it's funny what you say, especially about WOG parents as well, because I remember growing up and saying, I want to do karate. No, you get hurt. I want to play soccer. No, they'll break your legs. What about basketball? Oh, okay, you can play basketball.
I had to hide the fact when I was boxing. I had to hide. I couldn't tell my dad because he was like, I don't do it. It's too dangerous. Exactly, And I had to hide my black eyes. I'd be coming in the door, like trying to angle my face away so he couldn't see the black eyes and that. But I don't know. I guess they were just they had our best intentions, kind of, in their hearts. They want to look after us, but. I don't know. I needed to get out in life and just kind of go for it,
Yeah. And that sort of work ethic, obviously you brought that into TV and, you did take the hard road. You started as a stagehand at the ABC.
That's right. And it's, I don't know if any people know this story, but it was just by a fluke. I was just sort of in the old CES, which was the kind of, what is it today? The Centrelink. It was the Centrelink of its day. The old Centrelink was called the CES, the Commonwealth Employment Service. And a girlfriend of mine was trying to get some money because she got kicked out of home. And I was just wandering around the shelves because in those days there's no online little cards for jobs, And I just saw this thing. It said, sort of cleaner ABC studios. And I thought, oh, wow, kind of that could be good to be in TV even as a cleaner, And luckily I got the job.
Yeah. And what was how long did it take from being a cleaner to climbing your way to, say, your first I think your first film was More Than Legends. Was that your first major film?
Yeah, maybe how many years? Maybe 10 years, maybe slightly less. Because the ABC was great back then. You can't do it now, but you sort of would get if you're a cleaner in the studios, like a stagehand, is what they called it. So then you could go from, once you're in that department, if they trusted you, you could work as a kind of a props guy. You could work as a set dresser, which means you put all the furniture in the sets. And the ABC was making so much stuff. Back then they were making movies, they were making dramas, kid shows. It was full production house, And I got to kind of go around all these different productions and all these different roles. And just eventually they had opportunities and I just climbed the ladder and became what they called a junior producer, which is a director. Mm-hmm. And I just loved honestly, I loved every second of it, So for me, it was just like every moment, every opportunity, it just was so good, And I don't know, I made documentaries, I made music videos, I made TV commercials, and then eventually sort of started making my own short movies. And then, More Than Legends was the first movie. It was a dud of a movie.
Yeah, well,
it was a dud. Sorry, don't watch it anyway. It's crap. Shit. It's a shit movie. Don't watch it. You can watch it if you want.
But
good to watch it if you're stoned. A lot of good visuals.
Any particular type of psychedelics? Like we're talking mushrooms, weed, or any older anything?
I'm not really a drug taker, but the visuals are pretty good. So it's up to you, Probably from what I know about LSD, I've never taken it, but I reckon if you watch that on LSD, you would have the maddest experience. It's a very visual movie, but it's unfortunately it didn't really work commercially. But it was a lesson learned.
One of my mates actually watched Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas the other week on psychedelics. I think it was on mushrooms. He said it was 10 times better than watching it without the hallucinogens. But
when you tell him about Summer in the Darkness, mate, I reckon it's better than that. I've seen Fear and Loathing, and it doesn't have the visuals that this thing does. So
all right, man. Well, That's a call to our audience out there to check out More Than Legends, and definitely don't watch it without some.
Not that I'm encouraging, drug taking, because in New South Wales, that's a crime. To encourage a criminal act is a crime. I'm not encouraging it. I'm just suggesting it. If you're in that position and you wanted to do it, nothing to do with me.
Do you think that's a bit different these days? Because obviously you said it took you about 10 years, you're sweeping floors, you're doing all these things that perhaps kids these days may not be as open to doing, like with Instagram, with social media. It seems like there is a tendency to just want to make it overnight and not put in the hard yards.
Well, the way I looked at it with directing anyway, because I became a director first, a lot of people assume that I was an actor. I sort of gave up on acting, until pizza sort of came along, really. I just decided my ambition was to be a director, and I succeeded. I did a lot of stuff, but I did I remember, when I was just starting in TV, and then any job I've ever had, I just always give my best, so long as the place if they treat me well, I give it 100%, and no matter what shitty thing it is. I mean, even these days on pizza, the budgets are quite low, so I've got a lot of shitty jobs too. Sometimes I'll drive the car, fix the car, like the Valiants, So if you're not familiar with old cars, they're, pain in the ass. I was breaking down, so I have to manage the vehicles. In the last pizza, there's a sausage dog who's my dog in the show. It's actually my real dog. I had to bring him, I had to train him. Yep. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you have to do any crappy thing to get it done, and I do think that there is a generational problem now where I've had kids come on our sets. I'm very generous as an employer and a producer. I always try to hire young people, give them a go. And I won't say I've had a lot of great kids come through and develop their talents, but I have seen a lot of really kind of, let's say, lazy and I don't know, kids that I know it's like they wanted to walk in the door with no experience and suddenly be a director the next week,
Yeah,
it doesn't really work like that. I mean, I always kind of think about directing, at least, like being the captain of a ship. You couldn't be the captain of the ship if you didn't work around the ship. Like you've got to know the bottom, the top. You got to know inside and out to make it function. And I think that's exactly the same with directing. Like if you don't know all the various details of every little bit, you'll never be a good director.
Yeah, I think it's the same.
That's my opinion.
No, I think it's the same with entrepreneurship as well. Like unless you've worn the sales, marketing, product development hat, and you know how those different functions work, you can't really lead the whole ship. You don't know how to direct people unless you've actually been there and you know how those things work. So that makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned pizza, and of course in 1995 you put together a short called Pizza Man, which a few years later...
You've done your research. I've done my interview. Somebody, I've done some mainstream media, and they always get it wrong.
Mainstream media with their 5-minute interviews and sound bites and commercial breaks, mate. Here we go.
Fake news, mate. Fake news. I know. Yeah, that's right.
So Pizza Man obviously was the basis for Pizza. A few years later, SBS turning that into a TV show. But interestingly, when I was doing my research, I found that Pizza Man was submitted into Troupe Fest, and then 3 years later, you submitted another film into Troupe Fest called Intolerance. Yep. Now, I'd love for you to tell the story, what happened there, because I think it's so interesting, particularly with so much that's going on today in the business world.
Well, people probably think I'm a lot more clever than I am when they know this story, but the real story is this. So Pizza started by a bunch of short movies. I was working at the ABC with another director, and Troupe Fest was a very small film festival, kind of popular amongst filmmakers, I guess, more than the general public. But it was growing, I didn't really know anything about it. But I had a bet with this other guy, and we put some movies in. Mine came third the first year I put it in, and Nicole Kidman gave me the award and stuff. It's pretty big. It actually blew up that year. I think Tom Cruise was there too. I don't know why the street was blocked off, and this film festival suddenly just exploded. So I was just really lucky, And then the next year I put in another film called Space Pizza, so like a sequel, I guess, and I won the Audience Choice Award. And then the next year I won nothing. And then the following year was sort of the biggest year for Troupe Fest. That was set in Rushcutters Bay Park. So if you're not from Sydney, it's a huge park, and it was massive, and they were making Star Wars in Sydney at the time. So all the judges and everything were all, I think it was like we had the Samuel Jackson was there, Keanu Reeves was there. I think he was doing something in Sydney. But yeah, it was like they were making that Star Wars that they made. The Phantom Menace was made here, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, it was one of the Star Wars. It was massive, Now, that year I actually won another film festival with a different film, and it went into Troupe Fest, not for competition. So I thought, okay, well, that's it. I'm in, don't need to do nothing. And then a comedian friend of mine said, look, can you make this little film idea that I've got? And I said, oh, okay, we'll make it. And anyway, but the problem was I figured I've already got a film in there. They're not going to accept it if, it's stupid. I'm not going to give me 2 films, no matter how good it is. And I actually didn't think the film was that good. It was just this kind of like, the concept is like it's a comedian playing 2 characters. He's like a Jewish guy and a Nazi war criminal in a cab. And they just have a kind of funny kind of conversation, really. That's all it is. And anyway, so me and the editor at the end of it, we go, look, we've worked on this. It only took a half day to shoot too. It was the simplest thing I've ever done. We go, look, they're not going to accept that under my name. It's not going to get in. We should just make up a name. Who do they want to win it, probably like some girl from the eastern suburbs in Sydney, like, I don't know, if in other states, it's a rich area, So we'll give it a name, Laura Feinstein. We'll say Laura Feinstein made this film, just as a joke between me and the editor, right?
Yeah.
And when you know it gets in and it wins. So I had to get up in front of the whole Rush Cutters Bay Park and Samuel Jackson, who gave me the award. I had to explain that there was no Laura Feinstein. It was just me. Yep. And I'd already been in another film. And the actor who played in my film won another award, and I'd come and accepted it for him on his behalf because he was too gutless to show up. So you could just, it was a crazy night. I nearly got into a fight with John Paulson, the kind of guy who ran the festival. He was really shitty with me. It made the news, so I don't know.
That's hilarious, man. But I
don't know what it says, man. I mean, there's no moral to that other than I just had some dumb luck and I ran with it,
Yeah. That's hilarious. And it wasn't like you did it for, you weren't politically motivated to kind of say, oh, I'm doing this because I know they want a woman to win. It was...
Look, I'll be honest with you, I guess what's the word, cynically, I thought, that would be who they wanted to win.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, their own, I don't know, wherever their heads were at, they justified my kind of, skepticism. So there you go.
Given how upset John Paulson was.
He
you guys fight me, mate. Loads backstage, huh?
Yeah, my dad had to get in front of me, It was like, it was a proper, Paulson, he wouldn't have fought. His girlfriend sort of kind of got in the way, I've been in a lot of fights. He wasn't really going to fight. He was just.
He would have been like, just hold me back, so I can yell and pretend like I'm going to fight. Right?
He was like the ape banging his chest there. That was about it, But look, don't get me wrong. John's a great guy, and I got so many opportunities out of Troupe Fest and the wins that I had. I can't say one bad word about him, even though we had that fracas on the night. He created. Without him, I wouldn't have had the success that I have. So I owe him a lot, actually. Despite that he punch up.
Do you have any views on the fact that, nowadays that whole sort of, whether it's diversity quotas in business where we need to have 50% representation from females and so on, sometimes that comes at the expense of, say, the best person for the job. Now, this could be in arts and comedy and TV and in the business world. Do you have any views on that?
100%. I don't think anyone should have a job that isn't qualified, or I don't care. I think I've never liked tokenism at all. That's what they used to call it, where you just put someone in, okay, whatever, we need a green person, so let's just put them in. They might be useless. And I've seen token people hired for different roles, different genders, different ages, or the whole thing. And I think it's shit. You should get a job or an opportunity because you're good, and I don't, at the same time, look, I did come up in an era when there was a lot of racism towards anything that wasn't kind of white bread Aussie, so, it's a hard question. I think some people get opportunities through it. Maybe do well, but I don't know. It's a hard question, really. But at least in movies today, I don't like these kind of false diverse movies. I think everything I switch on that's on kind of Netflix, there's an Indian guy and there's an African guy and there's an Asian girl and there's a transgender person, there's a lesbian. And they're not necessarily good for the film or the story. They're just there, and they don't have any kind of, they're all really homogenous too. They're not, you watch these characters and it's like, okay, let's make a show in the 1940s and the chief of police is a black guy. Come on, it's historically accurate, stupid, like as soon as I see that, I go, it's nothing against the, diversity or anything. I feel like I'm the most multicultural kind of producer in Australia. I've hired more shapes, sizes, ethnic groups, disabled, young, old, but I hire them because they suit the role perfectly, and they actually bring some of their own culture to the roles. And I think that's why I've lasted so long, because there's a bit of an authenticity because of the way I cast, But that diversity, I don't like it. I can't watch shows when I just see homogenous actors who just have no flavour at all. You know,
it's like doing it for their ability as opposed to just ticking a box.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's like food. You know, I mean, it's like eating I don't know. A piece of white bread with nothing on it versus a decent meal. You know, like that's just. I mean, some people like white bread with no butter on it. I like a little bit more flavour. You know,
oh, makes sense, mate. So nowadays, back like you were saying, you had the Betamax, you had the big VHS cameras back when you were starting out. It was a different. The barriers to entry for creating content and then distributing that content were a lot higher than they are today. Obviously, anyone today with an iPhone can create content, put it on TikTok, and if you're consistent with that, you can generate a lot of eyeballs. But there's also a lot more competition today than there ever was back in the day. So, I mean, what do you think in terms of the barriers to entry? Was it easier then, despite the fact that it was difficult to create the content, but once you had created that content, there wasn't as much competition? I mean, where do you stand on that?
It's very difficult. I mean, I think there's benefits to both sides. I think I think the long hard road and learning, at least for me, it prepared me for when I had opportunities. So and it was difficult. I mean, bloody hell, it was. I didn't even know how I'm here, to be honest with you. I mean, I should be an Uber driver. I don't know how I ended up having a career, to be honest with you. I don't fit the mold. I mean, if you meet all the other people who work in the industry, there's not one person who is anything like me, and it's funny too, because quite often I find that some of the people I work with, the real kind of conservative people, they get a little intimidated because I think I'm just I'm more of a regular person than the TV people are very polite and would you like a cup of tea, this, I don't know, it's just a different flavor of person altogether, but now with the TikTok and all the rest of it, I mean, it's great that the kids can cut through, but I think the problem is because you can get sort of really famous overnight for nothing, like doing a couple of comedy skits or whatever it is. But then what do you do with it? And you can see a lot of you're just the flavour of the month, then you disappear, so unless you develop your skills to extend whatever it is that, the audience was interested in, like you can't just keep doing like, TikTok video, here's my little personal joke, got a funny voice or a funny whatever it is. You've got to. I've learned over my career you have to change, constantly. Otherwise, audiences get bored. So, that's the problem for the kids. That once they get famous, it doesn't. I mean, some kids have had amazing success. I mean, look at what's his name, Justin Bieber. He was just an internet sensation and gone on to become an international star. So it is possible to go that way. But I think in those instances when those kids have gone to become very successful, generally some manager or someone with experience in the industry has come in and helped them extend their skills. But just being a breakout doesn't necessarily mean anything, being an influencer, all that crazy stuff, I don't know. I don't really value kind of any of it because a lot of it's just talk and it's just a lot of wallpaper to me, without substance. And I think ultimately, I don't know, maybe I'm a dinosaur, maybe in the future, lack of substance will be the norm. But I still watch a lot of media, and I think that the things that succeed do have some levels of depth to them,
Yeah, well, I was listening to
very long answers, long, boring, not funny answers, man. You should ask me some questions to get some humor in here,
That's all right. Well, I was listening to the guys from Sushi Mango, and obviously they've blown up in the last couple of years, but even they were saying that they spent about 5 years, they're working full-time jobs, they'd come home, they'd spend every night recording content, and for 5 years it was basically, crickets and not making any money and everything else. But it's that consistency of showing up day after day after day for years on end, even today in this environment, to stand out from the crowd. Because like you say, yes, Justin Bieber did make it, but for every one Justin Bieber who's famous or internet famous, there's probably 100,000 who are posting content and getting nowhere.
Look, I don't know. Media is funny. I think you just have to have, if you've got some talent and you work hard at it, you can cut through, I think, is in any field, really, Unfortunately, some people have ambitions and they might not have the skills or the talent to back it up. They might desire a path, but, it's like I would have loved to have been a heavyweight champion of the world, boxer, but I just wasn't big enough. I just have to resign myself to the fact that, sometimes you can't do what you want to do.
Yeah.
You are limited by certain things in life, and you also have benefits by certain talents that you're born with. So I think that, if this podcast is about how to succeed, it's about looking at what you're good at and what you've got and making the best of it. And if you don't have it and you can build it, then you do that. And, I don't know. Doesn't mean if you have, I don't know, you just have to have some, I think if you've got the passion, like you're talking about Sushi Manga, obviously passionate enough to keep it going, I didn't know that about them. So I wish them good luck, they're the kind of people seem to know them now. But without the passion and the hard work in any field, you get nothing.
Yeah. And I mean, some people don't even find out what their strengths are because they get put on a certain specific path in high school, become an accountant or whatnot. But it sounds like with yourself, you tried boxing, you tried films, you did a lot of different things. And by doing all these different things, you get closer to finding out what you're actually really good at and what you're passionate about. And obviously for you, that was filmmaking and writing, but also combining that with some of your personal experiences. So obviously you were for a little while pizza delivery boy growing up, right? And
yeah, mate. I've had the wildest life. I mean, lots of stuff. Lots of people that know about me. I've traveled the world a lot of time, just on my own adventures, driven motorbikes in all sorts of crazy places, been nearly kidnapped in dodgy countries. So all that life experience definitely gives me two things. I guess it gives me a kind of much bigger view of the world, but it also gives me a lot of personal skills, and a lot of confidence. Like I've gone through a lot of dramas, in my life, but I didn't see them as defeats. I kind of, there's one quote that I read when I was a young man, and it stuck with me. And it reminds me of that movie you asked me about, that Summer in the Darkness, the big dud. Joe Lewis, who was a kind of heavyweight boxer back in the 1940s or 50s, I think, he said he learned more from his first fight where he got knocked down about, 10 times than he learned from any success, And I always kept that in mind, like when I had a sort of defeat or a bad time or whatever the hell it was, when you get a little distance from the bad feelings, you actually you should appreciate what you learned from it rather than dwelling on the kind of, today everyone's got they've got anxiety. I don't know, these poor millennial kids, they trip over a stick. I hate sticks now. I've got anxiety about sticks, but they're viewing their, they're viewing their kind of bad experiences the wrong way. A bad experience is a gift because it teaches you something. A good experience just makes you feel good. You learn nothing really from a good experience. A win doesn't teach you anything. I don't think. It pumps your ego up and you feel good and, you have a party, but you don't really learn anything from it.
No, you're absolutely right. I think, and you mentioned millennial kids and obviously Gen Z more so. I think there's a lot of coddling going on where people, participation trophies was probably the first thing that came along where kids are like, oh, but I want a trophy too, and I don't want to feel left out and all the rest of it. And that's kind of evolved. And nowadays we have, cancel culture because people get offended easily by hearing someone else say something that.
Look, I don't think you can blame the generation, though. It's not the generation's fault. I actually put the fault in all of that in governments who supported this kind of stupidity, common sense has been thrown out the door and, you can see where the world is now. We've got all these incredibly unhappy people, unskilled for life because these governments have set up this kind of situation for them. It's, whereas, when I was a kid, there was, the teachers would hit you, you get punched by the kids going home on the train. You have to toughen up or fail, So I guess it's sad for the kids who couldn't meet that challenge, but at least for me, all those experiences really helped me become successful in life. Like I said, every defeat ultimately became a win because that whatever I learnt in that moment, whether it was a fight or whether it was a meeting where I got a knockback or something, it makes you want to kind of, I don't know, you have to think about how to not be in that situation again. Like so that you lose, you want to try and go forward.
Yeah, no, I think definitely, and whether it's martial arts or any difficult pursuit, like getting kids involved in those pathways early on, teaches them that discipline and the fact that when you lose a fight, what can you take out of this? And you apply that sort of mindset to everything else in life. But
that's right.
You mentioned, I mentioned cancel culture as well, and of course, in your, whether it's pizza or Housos, you've obviously taken a lot of whether it's ethnic stereotypes, whether it's socioeconomic stereotypes, and blown them up to 11. Given everything that's going on now in the world where there is this sort of cancel culture that permeates everything, I mean, how is that kind of, I don't imagine it has, but how has that played in your mind when you are writing, a script for pizza, for example?
Oh, look, there's not, to me, it just, I don't really keep it in mind at all. You know, look, I sort of accept it, but I do a lot of live comedy as well because I love it. I travel all around Australia. And the vast majority of Aussies I see, doesn't matter what their shade, you know, black, white, yellow, green, small, tall, they all share a kind of a bit of a naughty sense of humour. I think that is the Australian sense of humour. I think the only people who don't seem to share that are kind of the woke people in Sydney and Melbourne. You know, they're about the only ones who get offended, I think. But, you know, the workers, your regular kind of Australian doesn't have that kind of sensibility, I think. You know, it's just kids who are getting brainwashed and, I don't know, older people who want to go down that way. Good luck to them. But I don't think it's definitely, political correctness is not, it's not in line with the Australian sense of humour and the tradition of the Australian sense of humour, you know. So I fight it. I'm the last one. Chris Lilly's gone. You've only got me left on TV, Australia. That's it.
And we've got another season of Pizza coming up as well, back in business on Channel 7. When does that kick off?
8th of September, 8:30. And again, there was a lot of crazy stuff in it. We give it to lockdowns, premieres. Jeffrey Epstein's in it, the Illuminati, all the stuff that you're reading about on the internet, you know. So
That's fantastic.
It's a pretty funny one, actually. It was very hard to complete because we had to, you know, there was COVID and there was a lot of bad weather and crazy actors. And the pizza shop that we were actually using was these Indian guys rented the shop to us. They decided to sell the shop mid-shoot without telling us, you know. So it was very problematic, but ultimately it's very funny. So I hope you enjoy it.
We've got Habibi and Bobo and all the old crew back in business, or?
Yeah, most of them are there. Some of the favourites aren't there just for different reasons, but, you know, some people have grown out of it. But Bobo's back, Sleek's back, you know.
Yep.
I mean, who else do you leave? You got Bobo and Paulie. I mean, that's it. That's Fat Pizza, really. And Sleek. I mean, we're the original, you know, the crew. So we're all back, you know.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I saw Sleek released a rap album as well. I think it was last year. So he's still pumping out content.
I'm not a music reviewer, mate, so don't ask me about the album.
Fair enough, mate. Fair enough. So we'll get into the book in a second, but one last thing I wanted to touch on with your career and the way you've approached things is really your writing process. Obviously nowadays, you know, I'm a writer. I've published a number of books, articles, all that sort of stuff, but, you know, we've got these devices in our hands and people are looking at them every 5 minutes, and sometimes that can it can kind of get between you and the creative process. It's a big distraction, and I just basically lock my phone away and just sit down and write if I'm writing for an hour or two, and that's it. But I'd love to know what your writing process looks like, particularly for, say, a TV show.
Look, it's changed over the years, but essentially I've become a better kind of, like, say, tappity-tap writer than I used to be. I used to be more visual. Actually, I didn't do scripts in the early days of Pizza. I did storyboards, so I drew everything out. Yep. And wrote everything kind of by hand, you know. So I kind of used to work shot by shot, you know, because that's how I started. I was only that when I was a kid in the side passage, I had to work it out shot by shot, you know, to make the sequence work. But then once, like, the computer editing came in, or non-linear editing, I had to change my whole headspace, because you can change anything around that you want. Like in the old days, you had to, like, be committed to every shot you were committed to. You know, you sort of had to plan it, and that was it. You put it was just went together like a construct. And that was it. So you had to do all the pre-planning to make it. But now you can change things quite a lot. You can do this, do that, you know, switch this here might be better there, you know, and it's faster and easier. So I have changed here. Now I guess what I do is I collect a lot of ideas over X amount of time. I just have, you know, a folder of funny things. And then when I get to the series, I kind of sort of think about each episode or movie. What's the overall thing? And then I guess I just try and, like, I sort of block. I kind of do an old school way of writing. I have a scene map sort of thing. So that means, like, a lot of squares for each scene, and then I'll write ideas within the scene, and I switch them around till it sort of works. And then once I've got that scene map, then I start writing. I find the writing really easy. I mean, I can do about 25 pages a day, which is, if I'm not, you know, being lazy, which is pretty decent, you know.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, there's parallels.
I don't know if that's not confusing. Was that confusing? I don't know.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, a lot of writers, including myself, like you said, instead of, you know, you've got the blocks, and you say when you've got the blocks and the general ideas, it makes it easier to write. Like with myself, I'd have 20 sort of ideas and a general flow of what I'm going to be talking about. but then under those topics, you start writing, and just having that flow makes it so much easier. But so speaking of writing books, you recently co-wrote a book about Phil Ugly Mawson, who is a boxer, a soldier, a bikie, a killer. This seems like a bit of a departure from what people might normally expect from you. How did this all come about?
Well, look, Ugly is his nickname, Phil, and he came in when we were filming Housos. Not the bloody camera now; it's not quite. But there we go. He came in because we were within Housos. We had kind of a fictitious bikie gang called the Hunters, So we needed extras to play it, and we had one guy who was a real bikie. And he just brought all his mates in for castings, and Phil was one of them. And he kind of looked pretty intimidating. He didn't talk very much, but he looked the part. So he was in there, and we did a few seasons of Housos. And I don't know, I would always be surprised that he found it very funny, and because he seemed to be like really kind of serious at first, and give you nothing. He's like Clint Eastwood, And then I don't know. Over the years, he opened up, and we became friends. And my dad used to march for his dad on Anzac Day because my grandfather was in the Navy in World War II, And so when my dad passed away, I started marching, for my grandfather. And Phil or Ugly would be at Anzac Day too because he's a veteran, and then we would catch up and get pissed. And anyway, he told me his story, and it's a wild story, it is what you said. He was a boxer as a kid, and then he went to Vietnam and had all these crazy, horrible experiences, came back, set up a bikie gang, and it existed, and it still exists.
Gypsy Jokers.
And then he's been shot, he's been stabbed, he's been in fights here and with other bikies here and overseas. He went to the USA and pretty much punched on with the president of a big American club and somehow survived, didn't get killed, Somebody tried to kill his family, so he shot them and he went to jail. And anyway, it's a serious story, but I don't know, I just felt that, he wanted to tell it. He wanted to make it a movie or a TV show or something. He told me about it. I was trying to get it up as a documentary at least, but nobody was interested. So in the end, I said, you know what, let's just do it as a book. And, that's the book, to plug it. I don't normally plug stuff like that, but it is a good book. Collaborated with another writer. It was more that, I made a promise to a guy, I'd try to get it out there, and I've done it. So I'm happy about that. It wasn't really like my ambition to do a book like this, but it is a great story. And I hope one day we get to make it into a TV show or a movie. I mean, it'd be great. Sons of Anarchy was kind of like a real, I don't know, I felt like a real sort of lukewarm telling of the bikie world. It's like a home and away version, But Phil's story is the real deal. The 70s and the 80s, that classic era of, when the bikies had a lot more play than they do now. And I think also, his era as a bikie, they were more about just sort of, from what he tells me, just partying, just bikes partying, really. It wasn't really selling drugs and, all that other stuff that sort of seems to kind of be happening now,
Well, it's interesting because his story was he was a Vietnam vet, and then he came back and he kind of was lacking that sense of community. So he started a motorcycle club, and through that, he built that sense of community. It seems like it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a bikie or an ethnic who's fresh off the boat. All you want is that sense of community and acceptance, right?
Yeah, look, I think you're probably right. I mean, I don't think that he necessarily gravitated to kind of other veterans, but he did want to create his own. I mean, the way he sort of says it, when he was in Vietnam and he had the opportunity when he was finished in Vietnam, they asked him if he wanted to join the kind of SAS, whatever it was back then, Mm-hmm. But then he had some big fight with the captain who asked him about that, and he said, "Fuck you, I'm going to go home and make my own army," which he did. So, I mean, not really an army, but I don't know. He did create his own world, and I think I guess it's interesting because if this podcast is about success and entrepreneurship in any field, any entrepreneur creates their own environment. I think they create their own world. All the successful people that I've met, they're not people who live in the world that was given to them. They create their own little world, and Phil did that too. So, in a bizarre way, he's kind of like a bikie entrepreneur, but not in it for money, just for the brotherhood of the club, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to ask, Ugly, the nickname. I understand it's not because he's difficult to look at. Where did that name come from?
Geez, you've done your research, bro. Another tick for you. No, he's actually, when he was a young man, he was a very handsome man, actually. I mean, he's been in a lot of fights now, so he's been, he's old, so you couldn't say that he's going to go on The Bachelor and win it. But when he was a kid, he had an ugly fighting style, so they called him Ugly. When he was a boxer, so that's how he got the nickname Ugly. Which I thought it was because he's a scary looking guy's got a tattoo on his face and everything. I thought it was it was weird. I go, the guy comes in and they go, this is Ugly, and you go, oh, hi Ugly, and is he going to fucking hit me now because I'm insulting him? I don't know.
Did you learn anything about bikie culture that perhaps you didn't expect to find?
Yeah, look, I was writing a comedy called Dumb Criminals, so I sort of tried to kind of get in. It was a comedy about bikies, so I sort of went on runs with what is a run? It's like when you go on the millions of motorbikes. Before all the bikie laws came in, I rode with the Hells Angels and I rode with a whole bunch of clubs. Did a little bit of comedy for them and stuff. And it is an interesting culture. It's a subculture, and I like subcultures. And I think what I liked about the guys that I met, I mean, I'm not into people who are thugs and, hurt other people, and that's no good. And there's probably a portion of bikies who would be like that. But the vast majority were just guys who, like riding and, like the brotherhood and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know, it's not as scary and full on as you would think. They're just really just a lot of like-minded guys who just like motorbikes, really, by and large. And there is a proportion of kind of criminal activity in different ones, but I didn't really sort of, attach myself to those people. I was more interested in the old school kind of 70s, kind of easy rider kind of minded sort of bikies, I think,
Yeah.
I like the freedom. I mean, I ride motorbikes, so, I guess hearing their stories about, how they were just big groups just in the old days in Australia before the national parks where you couldn't camp or anything, just drive around and camp somewhere, cause a lot of trouble, and get into fights and stuff. I don't know. I guess I kind of related to it a bit. It was a bit like how I grew up, except without the motorbikes,
Yeah. Do you have a bike yourself these days?
I got 3 bikes, all from the shows, because the movies pay so little. I just keep the props afterwards as payment sometimes. So I've got a Harley Sportster, I've got an Indian Chief, and I also drive a Ural sidecar. It's like a World War II looking sidecar thing.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Which is my favourite kind of thing to ride around. It's like being in the Great Escape every day.
Have you got one of the shops? Great Escape helmets? Just your scalp covered?
No, you got to wear the silly helmets, but I would wear that if it was allowed.
Fair enough. Well, the book is called Ugly, A Bikie's Life, and it's out through Penguin. People can find that on Amazon and anywhere good books are sold. Paul, we might just wrap up on a question about what's next for you.
We were scheduled to do another series of Housos. We were meant to shoot last week, but because of all these crazy restrictions and lockdowns, we're stalled. But we've got a contract with Seven to do Housos, another pizza, and a new comedy about local councils, which is going to be good. So that's
a plethora of material at a local council, man. There's a lot of.
Oh man, I've been waiting to do this for years because let's face it, everyone hates the councils. I feel like my shows are cathartic because you get to kind of we point out the stooges in society, and you get to have a laugh at the people that piss you off essentially in different ways. I mean, if you're a tracksuit wearing Lebanese gang member, you get to laugh at the shazzers, and if you're a shazzy, you get to laugh at the, and if you're both of them, you get to laugh at the cops. So I feel like our shows are kind of good. We give it to everybody equally, and now it's the council's turn. But who knows with these delays? I don't know when it'll be out. Hopefully next year.
How's that affecting the creative process? All of these lockdowns.
Oh, look, you shouldn't have got me onto this topic, mate. No, I'm very against it. I think it's disgusting what's happening in Australia politically, all jokes aside.
Don't worry, man. I just published a 1 hour long rant where I was talking about why this is not a sustainable long-term strategy. So feel free to unleash.
Yeah, forget the lockdowns, forget any of that. The personal freedoms are being taken away, and the way they're, they're actually doing unconstitutional kind of health direction orders and all this crazy stuff. And when you look at the world and you look at the statistics, it doesn't seem justified to me. I've read a lot, seen a lot, and I hear our chief health officers quoting stuff, and all they do is just throw slogans, and they're not looking at the latest information. And it really shits me. It's like, why do they have these jobs if they're not? I mean, if I feel like I'm more informed than the chief medical officer, more honest about what's going on, what kind of society do we live in,
Yeah, of course.
I smell corruption. I don't know where it is, but I smell corruption. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, and for me, it's mostly just focusing too much on these top line cases at the expense of, deaths, hospitalizations, mental health, businesses, economic security, jobs, all the rest of it. Just like we're not talking about all that other stuff, and we're just talking about case numbers, which compared to the rest of the world aren't really that high.
Well, it's ridiculous, mate. And look, like I said, I'm not going to say I'm one way or the other on any of it. I'm just open-minded. I like the truth. Mm-hmm. The truth of it is, in any country, 1% of the population catches it, and out of that 1% dies. So when you look at that statistically, and particularly in Australia, like, New South Wales, they go, 1,000 positive cases, and then, today, but then in hospital, incrementally, there's not that many people really. I mean, it's sad when people are passing away, of course, but the strange thing is, I saw an article in our news from the Daily Mail the other day, and from one of our medical officers, saying that they're now going to stop saying with the case numbers that people are dying from COVID, because they've realised that the people, and this is conspiracy theorists have been saying this, that people are dying from other things, but they've been labelled as COVID deaths. Yeah. So now in New South Wales, anyway, they've admitted that yes, that's happened. So they say you die with COVID. So you might have been,
you could have had leukemia or something.
Well, you're in hospital for cancer or something, and you suddenly get COVID and you die from cancer. They've been saying it was a COVID death. Then they just admitted it. So that's their words, not mine. So when you know that, you go, well, what's this all about? What are the actual numbers? We don't even know.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of inconsistent messaging and a lot of flip-flopping coming out of media, coming out of government, and that kind of doesn't do much for our confidence in what's going on. So,
well, look, the other thing, because you brought it up, so now you get my rant. Right? You should have just left it at the book. You should have signed off with the book. But the other crazy thing is, where's the logic? See, I hate this because I just feel like I'm saying logical questions, and people go, "Oh, well, you're obviously a conspiracy nut." Well, no, I'm not, because look, originally they said get the vaccine and you're fine for life. Guess, and then they used to say, I remember the other thing they said, if you don't get the vaccine, you're going to kill old people. You better do it. It could be your mother. And then guess what? They found out that the vaccine actually doesn't work. In Israel, the most vaccinated place, you get vaccinated 10 times and you can still give it to someone. Then they stopped saying that big threat about the old people now, haven't they? So they've changed their story continually. And, that's why I'm disgusted, because it's not honest. Like, an honest government would say, look, you know what? Things are changing. We're going to change our plan. New information's coming forward, but they just stick to this one kind of. Like, particularly you're crazy in Victoria. That stooge. That's a stooge. Sorry, Dan Andrews. You're a stooge, bro. Anyone wants to know what a stooge is? Dan Andrews is a stooge. You come out, you look dishevelled, you're flipping and flopping. You disappeared for 3 months, allegedly being bashed by someone. Some story about you hurt your back. I don't know. Stooges, mate. Stooges. So you shouldn't have brought up. I'm all upset now, mate. I was having a good interview. I'm happy to bring up the whole bloody COVID thing.
I'm happy we got some stooges into the interview, Paul, mate. That was on point. But look, we'll end it on a positive note. Pizza is coming back in business, September 8, Channel 7, 8:30 p.m. We're looking forward to that. We'll add that to the show notes for all of our listeners. But anything else you want to plug before we wrap up?
I don't know, man. The dog's going to get crazy now. It's probably, shut up. That's the dog from the show barking in the background there. Okay, so just sorry to interrupt the podcast. Shut up, dog. What do I want to plug? I don't know. Look, nothing really. I just want to sort of wish everyone, good health and happy times, and try not to be, sucked into all this negativity, and because it's putting a real heavy weight on our shoulders. And at least comedy's a good kind of relief for a little bit of time. So, if you want to laugh, I guarantee you'll get one on pizza. There's a scene. I mean, this is just a little hint of what you can get. There's a scene where I deliver a pizza to a roided kind of bodybuilder's house, the guy and the girl, and have a domestic. And the female bodybuilder has got an enlarged part of her anatomy due to steroids. And I notice it, and there's a fight. And then there's an unbelievable outcome related to, let's call it a extra-sized clitoris. So that's a little sneak preview.
There's a storyline for you. Well, I look forward to checking that episode out, Paul.
It summarizes my career. Today, it's naughty, but it's funny. That's it.
It's naughty, but it's funny. That's the nature of pizza. That's why people love it.
Well, man, look, I appreciate you wearing the tracksuit, and thank you. And I wish you all the best, man. And everyone listening, that really, really disheartens me and disappoints me, all the negativity in the world. And I just hope we all kind of sort of somehow have a good outcome through all this craziness, huh?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and I couldn't agree more. Thanks, Paul.
Good on your legend, and let's hope this world doesn't become even more fully sick.